This video will demonstrate how to check and adjust the hook timing of your Highland single head embroidery machine. It is very important that you watch this video in its entirety before beginning to do what you're seeing. If at any point in time during your initial viewing of the video you feel uncomfortable with any of the steps that are being described or demonstrated, please do not attempt the repair. Call your helpline and get assistance from them. This maintenance will require a few basic tools that you will find in your toolbox. You'll need a flat, medium-sized flat blade screwdriver. You'll need a small Phillips head or plus driver. And you'll need a small flat screwdriver for used for taking out needles. You'll also need a bent screwdriver, the flat side, in order to remove a few of the screws that are hard to get to. The first step is we're going to remove the throat plate and the rotary hook guard. We will be using the Phillips head screwdriver to remove the rotary hook guard. And then this tool to remove the throat plate. There are 3 screws, 2 at the back and 1 at the front. Once you've removed the throat plate and the rotary hook guard, you'll have access to the rotary hook. We're going to remove the bobbin case. Before adjusting anything inside the rotary hook assembly, I'm going to inspect it to make sure that my problem with sewing is not due to something other than hook timing or needle depth. So I'm going to manually rotate the hook using the knob on the right hand side of my machine, turning it counterclockwise, and I'm going to inspect the tip of my hook, see it coming around right here, to make sure that it's not broken or gouged or has a gap in it. I'm going to continue to turn it and look at the leading edge. The thread runs along this edge right here of the rotary hook. So I'm going to look at that edge and I'm going to use my thumbnail, not the pad, but the thumbnail, to rest against the leading edge of that rotary hook while I turn the hook to see if there's any scratches that might catch my thumbnail as it's rotating. See how I'm turning it back and forth? This one is perfectly smooth. If there's anything that catches on your thumbnail, that's going to be something that's going to catch the thread as well and perhaps cause a fray or a thread break. Timing may be fine, but the machine may not sew because of a rough surface somewhere inside the rotary hook area, either on the retaining finger or on the leading edge of your rotary hook. Typically, after a particularly nasty needle break, it could very well have scratched your hook. So if your problem with sewing comes after you've had a needle break, before timing the machine, you want to inspect this leading edge. If there's a roughness on it, you can use a piece of really fine sandpaper or emery cloth, at least 600 to 800 grit, and you can polish that gap and that might fix your problem. After inspecting the rotary hook and determining that there is no scratches or gouges on the rotary hook that might be causing your problem, next we will check the hook timing. I'm going to remove the screw on the left-hand side of my retaining finger. Then loosen the one on the right hand side just enough so that I can turn the retaining finger out of the way. And then that allows me to turn the basket so I can turn this down out of the viewing area so I can more clearly see the relationship between my needle and the tip of my rotary hook. I'm going to begin turning again, pushing in and turning counterclockwise the knob on the right hand side of the sewing machine. There's the tip of my rotary hook coming around the first time. The rotary hook always turns twice for every time the needle goes up and down. Now comes my needle down, and here comes the point of my rotary hook again. See it coming around here. I'm going to take it around until it's in the back, just behind my rotary hook, or behind my needle. Notice that it's gone past, so I'm going to rotate it back so it's right behind, not to the right or to the left, but right behind my needle. When it's in this position, I'm going to compare it to the scarf. And the scarf is that little indentation in the back of your needle. And that's where the thread passes through when the needle is in correctly. Right now, you should notice that the tip of my rotary hook, in relationship to the scarf, is about 50%, maybe just a little bit below the halfway point, this being the top of the scarf, that being the bottom, and there's where the rotary hook is coming behind the needle. It should be about 50% of the way, the halfway point of the scarf. Also notice that it's very, very close, when we look to the side, that the needle is very, very close to the needle. The needle is very, very close to the tip of the rotary hook. There should be a gap of about 4/10 of a millimeter to about 8/10 of a millimeter. It's really hard to measure that, so the way we're going to check that is I'm just going to push on the needle. The needle should deflect backwards just a little bit, but not very much before it touches the tip of the rotary hook. This is a perfectly timed hook. Next, I'll describe and demonstrate how to adjust the timing in case the timing is incorrect. There are 3 screws that hold the rotary hook in place. This one, which is raised off the rotary hook, and 2 more that are countersunk. One there, and one there. We're going to loosen the 2 countersunk screws first, just a little bit. Loosen it about a half a turn, and then I'm going to turn it back till it just touches, just begins to have a little resistance. Going to do the same thing with the other countersunk screw. Now I'm going to turn it until the screw that's offset just a little bit. When that screw is in this position on the right hand side of the rotary hook, that's just about at the timing point, or pretty close. So now what I want to do is I want to rotate it around, because again the rotary hook turns twice for every time the needle goes up and down. I want to turn it around until my, and you'll notice that I'm holding the basket so it doesn't turn. So I'm turning it again until my needle is in the down position, and then coming toward the up position. You'll see the tip of my rotary hook beginning to rise or come toward the needle. My needle's going down. It's at the bottom dead, and now it's beginning to rise. Okay. So if the hook needle position is not correct, this is where we're going to adjust that. You'll notice as the rotary hook tip is coming toward the needle while I'm turning the knob, that as it comes behind the needle, that the tip is right near the eye. It's actually out of the scarf, right at the very bottom. This machine won't sew because the tip won't pick up the thread, because there's the eye of the needle, and as it comes behind, the tip is at or below the thread coming out of the needle. So this timing needs to be adjusted. So I'm going to back it up just a little bit so that the 50%, the halfway point of my scarf, is about where the hook's going to come around. Then I'm going to loosen that third screw, the offset one, remember we've already loosened the 2 countersunk screws. Loosen it just a little bit. I'm going to advance the hook. See how the needle's staying the same and I'm twisting and turning the hook? And now I'm going to bring my needle back down a little bit so that I hit that 50%, that halfway point. Okay? The other thing that happens with my hook is that it moves forward and backward when I loosen that last screw. Okay? So I also have to be aware of not only the position of the relationship between the needle and the rotary hook in the scarf, but also how close the hook is or how far the hook is from the needle. So I'm going to set my position. And then I'm going to check the gap between the needle and the hook by just pressing lightly on the needle. Right now there's absolutely no deflection. That means that my hook, when it comes around, will actually hit that needle. So I need to push my hook back just a little bit. So I'm going to lightly tap the rotary hook with the back of my screwdriver and check my gap again. Still kind of tight, so I'm going to tap it a little bit further and try again. A little too much deflection, so I'm going to bring it forward just a touch. And there I have just a little bit of deflection. Now when I turn the needle around and the scarf is back where it belongs for sewing, that gap should be just about perfect. So the tip of my rotary hook is not going past the left side of my needle. It's at the halfway point in my scarf, this being the top of the scarf, that being the bottom, so it's right at the halfway point. And the gap between the needle and the hook, I'm testing it by pushing lightly on the needle, and it's deflecting just a tiny bit before it touches the hook. And now I'm going to tighten that offset screw just a little bit. Then I'll come back around and snug my 2 countersunk screws. And then I'm going to check that timing point one more time just in case it slipped while I was tightening the screws. Again, I'm going to hold the basket down so it doesn't rotate up in my way while the needle's moving up and down. Here comes my needle. It goes to the lowest point. Here comes the tip of my rotary hook rising to meet the needle. There they come right behind it. There's the bottom of my scarf. There's the top. My rotary hook's coming right behind it, right at that halfway point. And when I press lightly on the needle, it deflects just a little bit so that my hook won't hit my needle. One more time, I'm going to tighten all my screws to make sure they're tight. You must ensure that you tighten all these screws well before you start the machine again, or they'll come out and cause a problem. Once all my screws are tight, now I need to replace the retaining finger. So I'm going to turn my basket back around to the up position so the notch in my basket matches the retaining finger. Okay, without tightening, I'm just holding it in place. I'm going to do 2 more things. I'm going to rotate my needle back down again so that it's down in there, and you'll notice that the retaining finger is maintaining the basket so the basket doesn't turn. I'm going to run that needle so it's down inside my rotary hook. Then I'm going to take another needle, a 7511. I'm going to place it between the basket of my rotary hook and the tip of my retaining finger. And then I'm going to push it left or right to center the part of the retaining finger on my needle so that the needle should be dead center on the retaining finger. I'm going to push that there so the needle is now acting as a feeler gauge to set the gap between my retaining finger and my rotary hook. Don't push it all the way down into the fat part of the needle, but just right in the very middle of the needle so that it's using the diameter of that needle to set that gap. And push the retaining finger left or right till it's centered on the needle in the machine. And now I'm going to tighten both sides of my retaining finger, remove my needle, then cycle my machine to heads up. At this point in time, we're going to replace the throat plate and the rotary hook guard. And that's it. When putting the throat plate back on the machine, you have 3 screws that you took out previously. You'll notice that there's 2 different sizes. You've got 2 of a larger one and 1 of a smaller one. The smaller one goes in the front, and the larger one's in the back. You'll notice that these are countersunk. They have a little shoulder on them, as well as the places where the screws go into the throat plate. These are positioning screws. So it's really important that you don't tighten one of them first and then the others. You want to get them all started and then tighten them evenly so that we'll get them down in and just finger tight. So we'll use to just kind of run it down in there so that it's down inside the throat plate but not tight. And then we're going to do the same thing with the 2 in the back so that it positions the throat plate correctly. Got them all in there finger tight. All in there. The throat plate is now centered. Now I'm going to tighten all 3 screws.